Snow clung to the edges of the small town's rooftops, the last days of winter refusing to loosen their grip. Nadia pulled her coat tighter, the chill not only from the weather, but from the gnawing uncertainty in her chest. For months she had stared at walls cracked with dampness, at school registers filled with fewer students, at wages that dwindled before the month even ended. The promise of escape came in the form of a glossy brochure: international teaching positions, Dubai, bright towers, smiling faces, salaries that could change everything. Her mother kissed her cheeks before dawn, whispering prayers in Russian. "This is your new life, my bird. Don't look back too much." Nadia smiled, but her lips trembled. She wanted to believe the dream, to believe that the men from the agency had been honest. They had spoken quickly, their pens moving faster than her eyes. One had told her she would live in a teacher's residence. Another had avoided her question about return flights. On the train to Moscow, she stared out at forests blurring past, trying to drown out doubt. "What if I don't come back?" she whispered, but the words were swallowed by the rattle of wheels. At the airport, her younger brother ran to her, arms tight around her waist. His voice cracked. "Don't forget us when you're rich." Nadia laughed, tousled his hair, but the ache in her stomach deepened. The recruiter met her, near the check-in desk, briefcase pressed to his chest. He avoided her eyes, sliding documents across the counter. His voice was clipped, rehearsed. "You'll land in Dubai. The driver will take you to your housing. All instructions are inside the envelope." He pushed a sealed packet into her hands and checked his watch as though eager to leave. She wanted to ask why her contract seemed thinner than the one she'd first read, why her salary clause had been buried beneath paragraphs of legal jargon. Yet around her travelers laughed, duty-free bags swinging, families hugging. Her hesitation felt foolish, like a child afraid of shadows. When the boarding call echoed, her mother squeezed her hands. "God is with you." Nadia forced a smile, holding back tears, and walked toward the gate. The plane lifted from the runway, the town of her childhood shrinking into patches of light and dark. She pressed her forehead to the window. She pictured her classroom, the faded maps on the wall, the way students doodled in the margins of notebooks. She told herself she was more than that fading town, more than a teacher stretching pennies. She whispered, "A new beginning." The cabin lights dimmed, and she opened the recruiter's envelope. Inside were photocopied contracts, a laminated card with her name, and a single plane ticket. No return flight. The realization spread cold through her veins. She checked the fine print again. Employer reserves right to transfer employee between locations within the region. Her throat tightened. The passenger beside her, an older woman in a black headscarf, noticed her trembling hands. "First time abroad?" she asked kindly. "Yes." Nadia's voice cracked. "You will be fine. People chase dreams everywhere. Don't be afraid." Nadia nodded, but her mind refused to settle. Each word on the contract glared like a warning she had chosen to ignore. Hours later, when the captain announced descent, she leaned to look through the window. City lights glittered below, but something seemed strange. The flight path on the screen didn't match what she had expected. The map read Riyadh. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The plane wheels screeched against the tarmac. Passengers applauded, relieved. Nadia sat frozen, clutching the envelope. The recruiter's evasive glance replayed in her mind, her brother's farewell echoing like a plea. The door opened. Heat rushed inside. Outside, men in long white robes waited, their eyes fixed on her row. She drew a sharp breath, realizing her dream had just shifted into something far darker. Heat pressed against her skin the moment she stepped off the plane. It was not the humid warmth she had imagined in Dubai brochures, but a dry, suffocating air that clung to her throat. Nadia clutched her bag, scanning signs for familiar letters, yet everything around her was Arabic script and sharp voices calling orders. Two men stood by the gate, their robes white, their beards trimmed, eyes unyielding. One raised a placard with her name printed in block letters. Relief flickered. At least someone was waiting. But as she approached, the taller man extended his hand for her passport without a smile, without a word of welcome. "Excuse me," she tried in English. Dubai, I thought. The man's eyes narrowed. Come. His accent was thick, his tone final. They guided her through a side exit, bypassing customs. Her stomach churned. The terminal's glass doors closed behind her, shutting out the voices of other travelers. Outside, the night was lit with harsh sodium lamps. A black SUV idled, windows tinted. The shorter man opened the rear door. Nadia hesitated. My documents, are they in order? The tall one turned sharply, his gaze hard as stone. Quiet. Everything is arranged. She slid into the back seat, leather cold against her palms. The door locked with a click. As the vehicle pulled away, the airport lights faded, replaced by endless desert highway. She stared at the dashboard, noticing the GPS screen blank, no route displayed. Her voice quivered. Where is the school? Silence. Only the hum of the engine and the faint hiss of the air conditioning. Minutes stretched. The SUV passed towering walls, gates heavy with iron, minarets glowing against the sky. Finally, the car slowed before a high compound, its walls the color of sand, its windows narrow slits. Guards stood by the entrance, rifles slung across shoulders. The shorter man turned, his face softened by a smile that did not reach his eyes. This is your new home. You serve here. Her pulse spiked, but I was promised a contract, teaching children, language school. Inside, he cut her off. The iron gates groaned open, closing again with a finality that made her chest tighten. Inside the compound, fluorescent lights buzzed above stone corridors. Women moved silently in long black abayas, their heads bowed. Some glanced at her with hollow eyes, others avoided looking at all. A stern woman approached, keys jangling at her waist. She studied Nadia like merchandise. Another one, she muttered in Arabic before switching to clipped English. You will follow rules, no questions, no outside contact. Nadia's breath came shallow. I don't understand. I came for teaching. The woman's hand snapped against her cheek, not hard enough to bruise, but sharp enough to silence. You obey. Speak only when told. Tears blurred her sight. She swallowed the cry rising in her throat, forcing herself still. Her suitcase was taken. Her phone vanished into the woman's pocket. A door opened to a narrow cell-like room, a cot, a thin blanket, a barred window. She sank onto the bed, the air heavy with incense and despair. She thought of her brother's hug at the airport, her mother's whispered blessing. The dream she carried across continents had dissolved into walls that breathed control. Outside, the sound of the gates locking echoed through the night. The first morning in the compound began with a clang of metal against metal. Nadia startled awake, heart pounding, as the door swung open. A guard's voice rang down the corridor in Arabic, ordering movement. Women shuffled into the hallway, their abayas brushing against the stone floor. Nadia followed, still groggy, the fear from last night lingering like smoke. They were led into a wide chamber where the scent of incense and sweat mingled. Mats lined the floor, all facing east. An older woman in black barked instructions. The women bent in unison, silent, mechanical. Nadia stood frozen until the stern woman from last night pressed her shoulder down, forcing her to mimic the motions. Afterward, the women filed into a kitchen. Steam rose from vats of thin porridge. Silence ruled. They ate quickly, heads lowered. Nadia swallowed each spoonful with difficulty, her stomach twisting at the sight of guards pacing the walls with rifles. One woman, her eyes dark and weary, dared to glance at Nadia. Later, when the guards turned, she whispered in accented Russian, "You're new." Nadia's breath caught. "Yes, I was told Dubai." The woman's lips curved in something too bitter to be called a smile. "They tell many things. My name is Amina, from Uzbekistan. 10 years ago." Nadia's spoon clattered against the bowl. 10 years? You're still here? Amina's gaze hardened. Once inside, there is no leaving. Some girls are sold onward, some vanish. She lowered her voice further. This is not a school. It is a house of obedience. Nadia felt the words settle like stones in her chest. She wanted to deny it, to insist that her contract meant something, but the locked doors, the stolen phone, the guards, everything screamed otherwise. Later in the laundry room, she saw more clearly. Women scrubbed robes in silence, knuckles raw, buckets of cold water splashing against their skirts. One collapsed, too weak to stand. A guard struck her with a baton until she rose again, trembling. Nadia turned away, fists clenched, throat burning with helpless rage. At night, the compound hummed with whispers. From her narrow bed, Nadia listened to muffled sobs echoing through the corridors. Amina slipped into her room, closing the door quietly. "You must be careful," she warned. "They break women who fight. They promise us God's blessing if we obey, but it is only control. You are not the first teacher, nor the last." Nadia's voice cracked. "But why me? Why lie?" Amina's eyes glistened. "Money. You were sold. Like me." The words hung heavy, undeniable. Nadia pressed her face into her hands, trembling. Her family's hopes, her brother's farewell, all shattered under the weight of betrayal. Through the barred window, she saw only darkness. Beyond those walls stretched a city alive with noise, but unreachable. The compound was a fortress, a cage disguised in faith. As she drifted into restless sleep, one thought kept her awake. Someone had orchestrated this deception carefully, and she was only one among many trapped behind the veil. Days blurred into each other, each one a copy of the last. Nadia woke to the clang of metal, prayed under watchful eyes, worked until her hands ached, and returned to her cot at night. Time became a weight, pressing harder with every hour. Yet amid the monotony, she noticed something unusual, one guard who did not strike as quickly, whose gaze lingered with something that looked almost human. He was younger than the others, his beard thin, his steps hesitant when he passed the women. Unlike the rest, he did not bark orders, but spoke softly, often in Arabic Nadia could not understand. One night, as she carried a basin of water down the corridor, she stumbled. The basin crashed to the floor, water spilling across the tiles. She braced herself for the blow. Instead, the young guard crouched beside her, picking up the basin. His voice was low. "Careful, they will punish you." Nadia froze. His English was rough, but clear. You speak my language." He glanced over his shoulder before answering. "A little." He straightened, returned the basin, and walked away without another word. That single moment lodged in her mind like a spark. In the days that followed, she learned his name, Yusuf. He was assigned to patrol her section more often, though whether by chance or intent she could not know. He avoided speaking openly, but his eyes met hers when no one looked. Those glances carried a weight more powerful than words. One afternoon, as the women scrubbed floors, Nadia paused near a window where Yusuf stood guard. He shifted slightly, as though shielding her from the gaze of another soldier. His whisper was quick, almost swallowed by the clatter of buckets. "You are Russian." "Yes," she whispered back, heart pounding. He nodded once. "I studied some at university." Before. He didn't finish. The silence between them spoke of choices cut short, of lives redirected into obedience. That night, Nadia replayed the brief exchange over and over. For the first time since her arrival, she felt seen not just as another faceless captive, but as someone whose voice mattered. A week later, punishment fell on another woman who had spoken out of turn. She was dragged into the courtyard, forced to kneel while guards shouted verses. The blows rained down, each strike a warning to the rest. Nadia's stomach twisted. She wanted to scream to intervene. But when she glanced at Yusuf, she saw his jaw tighten, his fists clenched at his sides. He looked away, but not before she caught the shadow of pain in his eyes. Later, as Nadia carried laundry, Yusuf appeared again. His voice was tense. "You must not draw attention. They kill those who resist." Tears stung her eyes. "So we just accept it. Forever." His gaze flickered with conflict. "Not all things last forever." The words lingered. They were not a promise, but they opened a door inside her she thought had been sealed shut. Their exchanges grew bolder. A slip of bread pressed into her hand when rations ran thin. A warning glance before a raid on the dormitory. A scrap of paper slipped under her blanket with 2 words. Stay strong, but each gesture carried danger. Amina noticed first, pulling Nadia aside. Do not trust him. Guards are snakes. They show kindness, then betray. Nadia shook her head. He is different. Amina's voice was sharp. Different will not save you. Different will kill you. Still, Nadia clung to the fragile bond. In Yusuf's eyes, she glimpsed not just pity, but the faint possibility of freedom. Yet even as hope flickered, so too did dread. Because in a place built on control, every secret connection was a crime punishable by blood. The call to prayer echoed through the compound, deep and commanding. Women lined the mats, their movements synchronized under the watchful eyes of guards. Nadia bowed, her forehead pressed to the fabric, but her thoughts raced elsewhere toward Yusuf, toward the possibility of escape. That fragile hope had grown into something she could no longer silence. But hope was dangerous. That morning a murmur spread among the women. One of them had tried to run. Her name was Samira, a girl barely 18, with eyes that had always darted toward the gates. Nadia remembered her trembling whispers at night, how she dreamed of her family in Sudan. Now Samira was gone from her bed. The silence in the dormitory was sharp as a blade. Hours later, the truth arrived. Guards dragged Samira's body into the courtyard, her robe torn, her face bloodied. Women gasped, hands clamped over mouths. The elder in charge raised her voice, declaring her death a punishment from God for disobedience. Nadia's stomach heaved. She gripped Amina's hand until her knuckles turned white. Around them, the women knelt, forced to watch. The crimson stains on Samira's prayer mat spread like fire, a warning carved into fabric. A guard barked, "Learn! This is what awaits those who resist." Nadia trembled. The horror pressed against her chest until she could hardly breathe. Yet in the corner of her eye, she caught Yusuf. His jaw was clenched, his eyes refusing to linger on the corpse. He looked away, but his hands shook as he tightened his grip on his rifle. That night, the dormitory was heavy with grief. The women lay in silence, too afraid to weep. Nadia stared at the ceiling, Samira's lifeless face etched into her memory. The rage building inside her no longer felt like weakness. It felt like survival. When the door creaked open, Yusuf appeared in the corridor. He hesitated before slipping a folded piece of paper under her cot. Nadia's heart raced as she opened it with trembling fingers. Only a single line was written. "There is a way." She hid the note quickly, but Amina saw. Her eyes blazed. "You fool! Do you want Samira's fate?" Nadia whispered, desperate. "He means it. He knows something." Amina's voice cracked. "Kindness will not save you. Men like him obey when it matters. Do not trust your life to shadows." Still, Nadia could not let go. She found Yusuf the next day in the corridor, his eyes darting to ensure no one watched. "Why did you write that?" she whispered. "Because you are not broken yet," he murmured. His voice carried urgency. "There are people outside who would help, but contact is dangerous. If they discover me, I will die." Nadia's breath caught. "Then why risk it?" He held her gaze for a long moment. "Because every day I watch them destroy you, and I can no longer pretend." The weight of his words left her trembling. For the first time since her arrival, she felt the possibility of choice, not mere survival, but resistance. That night she dreamed of gates swinging open, of her brother's voice calling her name. But when she woke, the memory of Samira's blood returned, stark and cruel. Hope was alive, yes, but so was terror. The compound slept, but Nadia lay awake, clutching Yusuf's note to her chest. Escape was possible. Escape was deadly. As dawn broke, the prayer mats were unrolled again, their fabric still stained where Samira's blood had dried. Nadia's eyes lingered on that mark, and in her silence she made a vow. She would not die here. The city lights shimmered beyond the compound walls. So close, Nadia could almost feel their pulse. For weeks, Yusuf's notes had built into a fragile plan. One night, one chance, no second attempts. He had mapped out the guards' rotations, memorized the blind spots. Now the time had come. Her hands shook as she wrapped the scarf tighter around her head. Amina gripped her arm, eyes fierce. "Don't do this. If they catch you, they will not just kill you. They will make us all watch." Nadia whispered back, "I can't stay. I will die inside these walls anyway." Amina's eyes softened, though her voice remained bitter. "Then may God carry you further than he carried Samira." When the night call echoed and the dormitory darkened, Nadia slipped into the corridor. Yusuf waited by the far door, his rifle slung across his back. The faint tremor in his hands betrayed his fear. "You're sure?" he whispered. "No," Nadia admitted, "but I have to try." Together they moved through the shadowed passageways. Yusuf unlocked doors with keys taken from his superior, each click of metal louder than her heartbeat. Beyond the final gate lay the city, its noise carried faintly on the warm wind. They crouched low, running through alleys, lit by flickering lamps. Nadia's lungs burned, but adrenaline pushed her forward. She clutched Yusuf's sleeve, unwilling to lose sight of him in the maze. "Where are we going?" she gasped. "The embassy district. Russians keep offices there. If you reach it, they cannot take you back." The thought filled her with a surge of strength. Yet behind them, the shouts began. Guards had discovered the empty dormitory. The clatter of boots echoed through the streets. "Faster," Yusuf urged, pulling her down a narrow side path. They darted past shuttered shops, stray cats scattering into shadows. Gunfire cracked in the distance, a warning shot. Nadia stumbled, nearly falling, but Yusuf dragged her up again. Her chest heaved. "They'll catch us. Not if you believe in running." The embassy gates appeared at last, tall and unyielding, a Russian flag fluttering faintly under the streetlight. Relief surged through her so violently she almost collapsed. She pounded the gate, shouting in Russian, "Help me! I am Nadia Ivanova. I need asylum." Voices called from within. A guard in uniform approached, confusion on his face. He unlocked the gate slowly, suspicion mingling with concern. Nadia squeezed through, her body trembling as the iron barrier closed behind her. She turned back. Yusuf stood on the street, face pale, eyes fixed on her. "Come," she begged. "You can be safe too." But the embassy guard shouted, "Only citizens." His hand pushed Nadia further inside. Yusuf shook his head, a faint, broken smile crossing his lips. "My path ends here." Boots thundered around the corner. The compound guards appeared. Rifles raised, Yusuf stepped backward into the darkness, drawing their attention away from the embassy gate. "No!" Nadia screamed, reaching for him, but the iron gate held her back. The last she saw was Yusuf vanishing into the Riyadh night, swallowed by the men who once commanded him. Inside the embassy, voices surrounded her, questions, documents, promises of safety. Yet her ears rang only with the echo of Yusuf's words. Not all things last forever. Nadia was free, but her freedom carried a wound that would never close. Justice, she realized, was not the same as peace. Some truths were buried with those who sacrificed themselves to make escape possible. As dawn broke over Riyadh, the call to prayer rose again. Behind high walls, other women still knelt in silence. Nadia pressed her palms together, vowing their voices would not remain unheard. But in her heart she knew the whispers of justice were faint, and they demanded a cost she would carry for the rest of her life.